Hello, Canucks fans, and welcome to the Canucks Speakeasy. We're looking a little different this year, eh, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, you get to see our lovely mugs.
Look at us, just sporting our Canucks t-shirts and all our Canucks well, we need to work on that, I think, a bit there. But yes, welcome in season 5. We're doing a couple of things a little different this year. First off, we were going to try and record a full episode today, but due to technical issues, just not quite going to happen. So we get to practice our YouTube a bit here, and we're going to put out this just quick little hit to get us going, and we'll be dropping an official episode next week.
Yeah, we had some technical difficulties with Brendan. So next week, the third cast member of the Canucks Speakeasy will be joining us for a full Canucks Speakeasy official podcast, uh, episode 1 of season 5. But like you said, Pete, there's a couple of YouTube hits and topics Canuck wise we wanted to kind of get out to the people as kind of a video episode to this season officially starting. This is our preseason video.
I was just gonna say that this is our preseason as well. So we're not used to the video side of things. We're more used to the audio, as you guys know. So this kind of, for us, work out a few kinks, and we'll bring Brendan in. So yeah, that's the other big news with us, is we're going to 3 co-hosts this year, and the reason for that is it's just going to give us some more ability to put out regular episodes with always at least having 2 people available. So that was the whole thought process. And we know Brendan in the real world, and we watched a lot of games with him, and a good dude, and just kind of fits in with what we're doing here. So that is the other big change for season 5, and we'll see that soon. But we want to get a couple of things that happened in the off season discussed right away here before we get into all the preseason talk and training camp talk next week. Big news is the Canucks naming a captain later in the offseason here. We got Quinn Hughes as the captain of the Canucks. Doug, what are your thoughts?
I like it. I mean, I think Quinn Hughes has kind of been one of the more honest and vocal players on this core. Like, he's very vocal. He talks from the heart. He often says things to the media that I think kind of surprises the media. And one of the things will kind of tie into our next topic here. But I like it. I didn't think they would actually name a captain. I thought they might hold out on naming a captain heading into this season. I think they probably had one or two, maybe 3 guys in mind of who they would potentially approach, and just what their thought process would have been if they were to be anointed the captain of this team. And I'm guessing when they brought it to Quinn, he said absolutely he wanted that to take on the C on his jersey and become a leader. And I really like it. And I think it kind of transitions nicely from Bo getting traded last year to now this year. We do have a captain kind of driving the ship again. And, I don't think you need a raw guy banging on the walls or shaking guys, trying to get them pumped up like you see in some of these movies. Steve Yzerman comes to mind. Joe Sakic comes to mind. Those quiet leaders. Nicholas Lidstrom, after obviously Yzerman left Detroit, another quiet leader. So yeah, I absolutely love it. And I was actually thinking, and a little question for you, Pete. Have the Canucks ever had a defenseman as team captain before?
I mean, it's been a while. Was Jovo a captain? I don't remember.
No, Marcus
No?
Naslund would have been the captain.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if they have, it's certainly either before my time or when I was a kid. It's certainly unique. We've had a goalie as a captain here, but not a defenseman that I can remember. I was, if you told me a year ago, 6 months ago, even 6 months ago, 5 months ago, if you told me that Quinn Hughes would be the captain of this team, I wouldn't have believed it. I just it kind of really seemed to gain some steam as the season went on, and he kind of seemed more of a logical fit. Now I know that the Pearson contract, some people think that may have come into play, and how Hughes is signed longer. I'm not 100% sure Pearson is the right guy to lead this team. And I've never been a big fan of like your superstar players have to be the captain. Now I consider Hughes a superstar as well, but I think kind of Pearson is, kind of that next level superstar in some ways. And JT Miller being the older guy, I've been pushing, as you know, for him to be more of a mentorship role, which we're already starting to see with him and with some of these young guys. So as the season ended and then the summer went on, you started to hear more language about this coming out of the Canucks media and various conversations. So it wasn't too surprising when it finally came and happened. But again, if you told me like at 5 6 months ago, I would have been surprised. I probably wouldn't have been a fan of it at that time. But as we've come along, I like it, and I really like how they had Demko, Petey, and Miller there for the press conference and made a point of showing that. And going in to the season, you mentioned how you thought they may not have a captain. I thought that too. I thought they might go without a captain. But I do like that they kind of have everything seemingly set now, right? Like you're kind of running out of excuses now. You've got your guys at the top, you got your coaching staff in there, you've got your leadership team. You can maybe make one or two more excuses, but it's really kind of sets it up that the time is now.
Yeah, and look, I do think we saw these signs from Hughes. I think back not to the end of this year, but to the end of the previous year. I think it was Ian McIntyre asked Brock Besser, I believe it was him, or maybe it was Ben Kuzma. Maybe it was Kuz. Anyways, one of them had asked about Brock losing his dad and just how hard it was. And Brock broke down and started crying. And Hughes was like the first person to kind of like console him. And I do think at one point Brock got up and left, and Hughes got up and followed him as well, right? This year, and this kind of will tie into one of the other topics we want to talk about, or sorry, last year, was Hughes, I believe, was kind of the first person to kind of talk about Pearson having multiple injuries. He was one of the first people to actually bring that up to the media about how Pearson's had multiple injuries on his wrist, where I think most fans and most of the media didn't really know that. They knew that he had a wrist injury and, he was going through rehab and he kept having setbacks. But, the fact that he had gone through, I think, several, I'm not going to speculate on the amount of surgeries he's had on the wrist, but, when Hughes kind of said that, that was kind of, I think a lot of fans and media gasped at the amount of surgeries he had had. And Hughes kind of just spoke about that frankly and how you know, Pearson is one of their friends. And it just goes to show his leadership, right? That he's not afraid to kind of say those things that I think are meant to be in the room. And I think, that shows for a young guy, because Hughes is still very young. It shows great poise. And, he's there for his teammates. He's a guy when, Brock is kind of, sharing the trauma of losing his father. And, Quinn is the first guy there consoling him, as was Petey, don't get me wrong. But yeah, the more and more we saw Hughes kind of show these little spurts of leadership the last couple of years, it really does make a lot more sense.
His dad was a captain in the NCAA as well. He comes from a sporting family. I wouldn't be surprised to see all his brothers continue in leadership roles as well. So it does seem to be in their blood. So I do get that. He always kind of was that, kind of quiet, soft spoken guy to me for a while, because probably because he looked like he was a teenager for the most part. But, you're talking about Pearson there as well. And that was our next topic. We got a couple of quick hits here. The Pearson trade was something that kind of still surprised us. I think the Canucks did pretty well with this. First of all, to unload some salary. Yeah, you had to chuck in a third rounder, but at least it wasn't a second rounder, right? I mean, I know it sucks that you have to give up assets, but that's just the nature. Every team in the NHL has to give up assets to dump salary. The Canucks save about 1.4 million here, and they bring in a backup goalie with some experience to give him a bit of depth that the organization is familiar with. For me, this is a win trade for the Canucks, even though they gave up a third rounder in there, but frees up some cap space and brings in a goalie and helps out Thatcher Demko and Ian Clark a bit more as well.
Yeah, look, I think there was a lot of speculation whether or not Pearson was going to be on LTIR to start the season, and he wasn't. He was on the ice with the Canucks for the first couple of days. They were skating, I believe, up at UBC. And you started hearing that morning. I think Rick Dollywall and Elliot Friedman were both reporting that, hey, they're hearing the Canucks are, aggressively trying to make a trade, and that was probably because Pearson wasn't going to end up on LTIR and they were going to be over the cap. And unfortunately, to shed salary this day and age, it does cost something. And a third round pick in 2025. Yeah, I get it. The Canucks need they need as many picks as possible. and they need to start restocking the cupboard while also trying to get this core to the next level and become a perennial playoff team. But I think the damage between Pearson and the organization, even though a lot of the players still really supported Pearson, I just think the damage between Pearson and the organization had been done. And whether, that's on the Canucks, that's on Pearson for taking it a little bit more public than what Hughes originally had stated in his comments, whatever it is, I just think they didn't want it to be a distraction. They didn't want people to be asking Pearson about it, asking, how he felt about the organization and what had happened, and vice versa. I don't think, management or Talkett wanted any of that. They just wanted to be able to focus on getting off to a really good start this year. And they were also able to, like you said, Pete, shore up their backup goaltending. Last year wasn't a great year. I forget the guy's name now, the backup who was there last
Spencer
year.
Martin.
Spencer Martin, he fumbled. Now, to be fair, he was also thrust into the starting role with Demko getting injured. And Casey DeSmith is a proven NHL backup goalie. And you mentioned this, Pete. The management group are familiar with him with his time in Pittsburgh. And yeah, I think it also allows a young goalie like Seeloffs to spend the entire year in the AHL and further develop his career path.
Yeah, I think Seeloffs is going to start in the A, especially after kind of that debacle of an opener, that 10-0 game. And hey, just with that, I mean, I'm not a big preseason guy. I don't put too much in it. And I know it was mostly an AHL against an NHL roster, but still, it kind of sucks. But I do think that Seeloffs is more than likely going to be the guy in the A. And yeah, the Canucks last year when they were down to Martin and Delia didn't quite work out. So I think Casey DeSmith, who I think has played almost a half a season worth of games and the most he's played. I got to double check that, but I think he played like a 38 game season. So there's a little bit more that he can do. And again, it's a guy that the team is familiar with. So for me overall, it's a good trade. And you're right about the distraction. I'd actually written down distraction on my notes here because the only distraction that we really kind of have now, and that's one that the team isn't making as much as the Pearson extension, but you have your captain now. Pearson is gone, and maybe Mikheyev is starting on LTIR now as well, which will be interesting to see. I hope not, but all of a sudden there may be a little more cap wiggle room there because of that, which is good because towards the end of the summer there, now we're kind of going a little bit way back for a lot of Canucks fans. This may be old news, but we haven't touched on it here because we've been obviously away. But Canucks did bring in Suter, which is a guy that I don't know if we talked about it on the episodes, Doug, but I know we've talked about Suter and how he would be a good fit in this team, a guy who can kill penalties, a guy who has some scoring ability in the bottom six, which, I hate always saying bottom six, but maybe we have a top 9 this year, although I feel like I've said that before. Again, I like this. It's not a big hit. The Canucks apparently got him because they offered the second year on the deal. And it gives them a little more depth at center with bringing in Suter and Bluger. And you've also got Neil Zaman there to kind of fight for those third and fourth line roles. Do you think this is money well spent?
I do. They needed to add and shore up their center depth. I think that is probably this franchise's biggest weakness now is center depth throughout the organization. This past draft, obviously, they drafted with their first and second pick 2 right shot defensemen, which really kind of shored up that side of the defense. But now it's the center depth. And I think, you added Teddy Bluger, which we did discuss kind of after free agency, and then Pia Suter getting added late into the summer. I think it just kind of shores up that depth. You still have a guy like Sheldon Dries as well, who, now there's just a little bit more competition in order whether or not he can make the team. But I think that has definitely been a weakness. And I like the signing. I think he's a guy, like you said, that can really help the penalty kill and shore up that bottom six. It sucks that he's a left shot center and not a right shot center. I think that's one of the things with Teddy Bluger that is really appealing is he is a right shot center. So yeah, I think it's a solid signing for the Canucks. The extra year I'm fine with as well.
Another guy at center to kind of watch who's had a good camp so far, Atu Ratu, and seeing what he can do. Obviously, I expect him to be in Abbotsford this year, but he's another guy to watch. In terms of center depth, that's kind of the only one we really have right now. So I do think the Suter move, bringing him in on a 2-year deal as well, that was the cost of getting it done. There are apparently a few teams out there making him offers, but they were all offering 1-year deals. So I'm excited to see what we have there. I'm excited to really see I'm doing it again, man. Every year I'm like, I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. Then camp starts. I'm like, oh, we'll see. And then the Canucks come out, lose 10-0 in Calgary. I'm like, oh, geez, keep everything in check. But I am excited to see the Canucks do play tomorrow, which is the 27th, Wednesday. They have a preseason game. I'm excited to see what the team looks like with a few more of the regulars in the lineup and a few more of the new faces. But Suter is one of the guys I'm excited to see play for them. But it's going to be a fun year, and hopefully we get all our glitches worked out and we can get a new episode out next week. Bringing in a third co-host and bringing in YouTube, a couple of big challenges for us. So we're kind of dipping our toes in the water here, but hopefully we are able to crank out a full-length episode next week. Right, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, season 5, the Canucks season is starting. You and I, Pete, always talk about how this is our favorite time of year for sports. You got the NFL back, baseball playoffs are about to start. Obviously, you got hockey and basketball starting pretty quick here. It's good to be back on the airways. It's good to kind of dip our toes into the YouTube stratosphere. Adding a third co-host, I think, is going to bring a lot of added value, not only to the podcast, but also to the listeners. So we can just be more consistent getting episodes out to people. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this season. Win, lose, or draw for the Canucks. I just, it's always going to be an entertaining season, and there'll be tons of content for us to talk about.
You bet. All right, folks. Thanks for checking out our first episode on YouTube, and we'll see you guys all very shortly with some full-length episodes coming up here for the new season. Take care.